Dr. Elena Martinez walked slowly through the metal halls of the Deep Mountain Communications Facility. Her hands shook as she held the datapad that contained humanity's final message. Outside the thick walls, Earth was dying. The sky had turned a sick yellow color and the air burned anyone who tried to breathe it. The oceans had become poison, and the ground cracked like broken glass under the heat. Elena stopped at the main control room door. She could hear the hum of the massive transmitter array that would send their message across the galaxy. This machine was built with the last good materials Earth had left. It used more power than entire cities once needed, but today it would do something no human device had ever done before. It would make sure the universe remembered them. Jake Morrison looked up from his control panel when Elena entered. His young face showed the stress they all felt. He had been working for 3 days straight to keep the power systems running. The facility was buried deep inside a mountain, but even here they could feel the planet shaking as it slowly tore itself apart. "Status report," Elena said in her calm voice. She had been a scientist for 40 years and had learned to stay steady even when everything was falling apart. "All systems are green," Jake replied. "The quantum transmitter is ready. We have maybe 6 hours before the main reactor starts to fail. After that, we lose everything." Elena nodded and moved to the main console. Through the thick windows, she could see the transmitter dish pointing up toward the surface. Miles above them, automated systems would open a path through the rock when they started broadcasting. It was a one-way trip. Once they used this machine, the facility would be destroyed. "Have you made contact with the other stations?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "We lost Denver 2 hours ago. Miami went dark yesterday. We might be the last ones left." Elena felt a weight in her chest but did not let it show. For 3 years they had been picking up signals from space. Not random noise or natural phenomena. These were clear transmissions from dozens of different alien civilizations, advanced species that had been watching Earth for who knows how long. They had seen humanity struggle and fight and slowly poison their own world, but they had never tried to help. They just watched like scientists studying insects. "Then we speak for everyone," Elena said simply. She sat down at the main control chair and began the startup sequence. The transmitter came to life with a deep thrumming sound that vibrated through the mountain. On her screens, she could see power levels rising to maximum capacity. This machine could send a signal that would reach every star system within 1,000 light years. Every alien civilization that had been watching Earth's final years would hear this message. Jake moved to the recording station. "We're live in 30 seconds, he announced. Elena took a deep breath and looked at her notes one more time. She had spent weeks writing and rewriting this message. It had to be perfect. It had to make the aliens understand what humanity really was. Not just another species that had destroyed itself, but something special that deserved to be remembered. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," Jake said. "The signal is strong and clear." Elena leaned forward to the quantum microphone. This device would translate her words into mathematical concepts that any intelligent species could understand. Her voice would carry the thoughts and feelings of every human who had ever lived. "To any civilization receiving this transmission," she began, "we are humanity of Earth, and we are dying. But before we fade into the cosmic dark, we want you to know what we learned, what we achieved, and why our brief existence mattered." She paused and looked around the control room. 5 other technicians worked quietly at their stations, keeping the signal strong. Each of them had volunteered to stay behind when the evacuation orders came. They knew this was a one-way mission. They would die here in this mountain, but their sacrifice would make sure humanity's voice reached the stars. "You have been watching us for years," Elena continued. "You have seen our wars, our pollution, our mistakes. You have watched us slowly kill the world that gave us life. Perhaps you think this proves that intelligent life always destroys itself. Perhaps you believe that emotion and aggression are fatal flaws that make civilization impossible." The mountain shook again, stronger this time. Dust fell from the ceiling and several warning lights flashed on Jake's control panel. He quickly adjusted the power flow to keep the transmitter stable. "But you are wrong," Elena said, her voice getting stronger. "Yes, we destroyed our world. Yes, we fought wars and made terrible choices. But we also did something else. We never gave up. We never stopped trying to be better than we were." She thought about all the humans who had lived and died on Earth. The first people who learned to use fire and build tools. The explorers who crossed dangerous oceans to find new lands. The scientists who spent their lives trying to understand how the universe worked. The artists who created beauty even in the darkest times. The ordinary people who loved their families and tried to make tomorrow better than today. We want you to understand something about our species, Elena said. We were not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest beings on our world. We survived because we had something else. We had the ability to hope when hope seemed foolish. We had the courage to keep trying when trying seemed pointless. We had the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The reactor alarm started going off. Jake quickly moved to silence them while keeping his eyes on the power readings. They had maybe 4 hours left instead of 6. The planet was dying faster than they had predicted. Elena continued speaking, knowing that every word might be her last. This message had to reach across the galaxy. It had to make the aliens understand that humanity was worth remembering. That their brief time in the universe had meant something important. We are sending you this message not to ask for help or pity, she said. We are sending it because we believe our story contains something valuable. Something the galaxy needs to hear. The transmission continued, carrying Elena's words into the vast darkness between the stars, where ancient civilizations would soon learn what it truly meant to be human. Lisa Parker took over the microphone as Elena stepped back from the main console. The young communications officer had been chosen for this part of the message because she knew human history better than anyone else in the facility. She had spent her whole career studying the rise and fall of civilizations, but now she would tell the story of the greatest civilization that had ever existed on Earth. I am going to tell you about my people, Lisa said into the quantum transmitter, not the humans you have been watching for the past few decades as we poisoned our world and fought our final wars. I want to tell you about the humans who came before, the ones who built everything we became. Outside the facility, the dying Earth continued its slow collapse. The temperature readings showed that the surface was now hot enough to melt lead. The atmosphere was so thick with toxic gases that even their deep mountain shelter was starting to feel the effects. But Lisa's voice remained steady as she began humanity's greatest story. 60,000 years ago, our species almost went extinct, she said. A massive volcano erupted and covered the sky with ash for years. The cold killed most of the plants and animals we needed to survive. Our entire species was reduced to maybe 10,000 individuals hiding in caves and struggling to find enough food to live. Lisa looked at her notes, which contained the highlights of human achievements spanning thousands of years. She had to choose carefully. The alien civilizations listening to this message were ancient beyond human understanding. Some of them had existed for millions of years. To them, humanity's entire existence would seem like a brief moment. But she had to make them understand that this brief moment had been extraordinary. Any reasonable species would have given up, she continued. The world had become hostile and food was scarce. The logical choice would have been to accept extinction gracefully. But humans are not reasonable. Instead of giving up, we learned to work together in new ways. We developed language to share ideas. We created tools to make ourselves stronger. We discovered how to control fire to keep ourselves warm. The facility shook again as another earthquake hit the mountain. Jake Morrison quickly checked the power systems and gave Lisa a thumbs up. The transmitter was still functioning perfectly. Their message was reaching across the galaxy at the speed of light, carrying the story of humanity to civilizations that had forgotten what struggle meant. We survived the volcanic winter, Lisa said, and then we did something that still amazes me. We left our safe hiding places and spread across the entire world. We walked into deserts and frozen wastelands and dangerous jungles, places where we had no business surviving, but we adapted to every environment on our planet. She told them about the first humans who crossed the ice bridges to new continents, about the people who learned to sail across vast oceans in tiny boats, not knowing what they would find on the other side, about the communities that turned barren deserts into fertile farmland and built great cities in places where nothing should have been able to grow. Every time our environment tried to kill us, we found a way to turn it into our advantage, Lisa explained. When the ice ages came, we learned to hunt the great mammals and use their fur for warmth. When the ice melted and flooded our settlements, we learned to build boats and fish the new seas. When diseases swept through our populations, we developed medicine and learned to care for our sick. The mountain shook more violently, and several ceiling panels fell to the floor. But Lisa kept talking, knowing that this story had to be told completely. The aliens needed to understand that humanity's strength had never come from superior technology or perfect planning. It had come from their refusal to accept defeat. "You have probably studied thousands of species across the galaxy," she said to her invisible alien audience. "You have seen how evolution works. The strong survive and the weak die out. But humans broke that rule. We made the weak strong by working together. We carried our injured instead of leaving them behind. We fed our hungry even when food was scarce. We protected our children even when it put us in danger." Lisa talked about the great human achievements that had nothing to do with technology. The art painted on cave walls by people who barely had enough to eat. The music and stories that were passed down through generations to preserve important knowledge. The laws and customs that helped communities work together even when individuals disagreed. We built the first cities not because we had to, but because we wanted to create something beautiful, she said. We developed writing not just to keep records but to share our thoughts across time and distance. We created mathematics not just to count our possessions, but to understand the patterns that govern reality itself. The power fluctuations were getting worse. Jake was having to constantly adjust the systems to keep the signal stable. They probably had less than 3 hours left before the reactor failed completely, but Lisa continued with humanity's story, moving through the centuries of human development. "We learned to grow our own food instead of just hunting and gathering," she said. "We domesticated animals to help us work. We discovered metals and learned to forge tools that could reshape the world around us. And through all of this, we never stopped asking questions. Why do the seasons change? What are those lights in the sky? How can we make life better for our children?" She told them about human curiosity, the drive that had pushed their species to explore every corner of their world, and then reach for the stars beyond, about the scientists who spent their lives trying to understand how things worked, about the inventors who created machines to make human life easier and more productive, about the philosophers who asked the deep questions about existence and meaning. "We were not content to simply exist," Lisa explained. "We wanted to understand our place in the universe. We wanted to create things that had never existed before. We wanted to leave the world better than we found it." The facility's life support system started showing warning signs. The air was getting thinner and the temperature was rising despite their deep underground location. But Lisa pressed on with her story, reaching the point where humanity had first begun to reach beyond their home planet. "And then we looked up at the stars and decided that even infinity was not beyond our reach," she said. "We built machines that could fly. We sent messages into space hoping someone would hear us. We dreamed of the day when we would walk on other worlds and meet other intelligent beings." Lisa's voice carried across the galaxy, telling the story of a species that had never learned to accept limits, even as their world died around them. Ryan Brooks moved to the transmission station as Lisa finished her part of the message. As the facility's chief engineer and xenobiology expert, he had spent years studying the alien signals they had been receiving. He understood better than anyone what they were really dealing with. The civilizations listening to this broadcast were not just advanced. They were ancient beyond human comprehension, and that was exactly the problem. "Advanced civilizations of the galaxy," Ryan began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had dedicated his life to understanding alien technology. "We offer you more than just our story. We offer you a warning born from our unique perspective as a species that refused to evolve past our aggressive instincts." The facility's emergency lighting flickered as another power surge hit the systems. Jake Morrison was working frantically to keep the quantum transmitter stable. Outside, the mountain itself was beginning to crack under the immense heat and pressure of Earth's atmospheric collapse. But the signal remained strong, carrying Ryan's words across the vastness of space to ears that had not heard a truly new idea in thousands of years. "For the past 3 years, we have been monitoring your communications," Ryan continued. "We have analyzed your technology signatures and studied your societal patterns. What we discovered should concern every thinking being in this galaxy." Ryan had spent countless hours poring over the data they had collected. The alien civilizations were incredibly advanced, with technology that made human science look like children playing with sticks and stones. They had mastered faster-than-light travel, artificial intelligence, and energy manipulation on a scale that defied human understanding. But there was something deeply troubling about their signals. "You have achieved perfection," Ryan said, choosing his words carefully. "Your societies show no signs of conflict, suffering, or struggle. Your technology has remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. Your populations are stable, your resources are managed efficiently, and your governments function without corruption or dissent. He paused to let that sink in. To human ears, such a description might sound like paradise, but Ryan had studied enough evolutionary biology to understand what it really meant. Perfection was another word for stagnation. When a system became too stable, it stopped growing. It stopped adapting. It slowly began to die. The crystalline architects of the Vega system, Ryan continued, referencing one of the most powerful civilizations they had detected. Your people have ruled the same star systems for 50,000 years without significant change. Your technology signatures show no innovation, no experimentation, no growth. You have achieved perfect efficiency at the cost of progress. The mountain shook violently, and several pieces of equipment fell from their mounting brackets. The external sensors were reporting that the surface temperature had now exceeded the melting point of copper. Earth's final hours were approaching rapidly, but Ryan pressed on with his analysis, knowing that this might be humanity's most important contribution to galactic civilization. The energy beings of the Andromeda Collective, he said, addressing another ancient empire, you have transcended physical form and eliminated death from your existence. You have unlimited time and unlimited resources, but when did you last create something new? When did you last experience genuine surprise or wonder? Ryan had studied the communication patterns of dozens of alien civilizations. They all showed the same troubling characteristics. Their languages had not evolved in millennia. Their art and culture had reached a static state of perfection that never changed. Their scientific research had slowed to a crawl because they had already discovered everything they thought was worth knowing. You eliminated conflict from your societies, Ryan explained. You removed suffering and struggle and competition from your daily existence. In doing so, you also eliminated the very forces that drive evolution, innovation, and growth. He thought about human history and how different it was from what they observed in alien civilizations. Humans had never achieved perfect peace or perfect stability. There had always been competition between ideas, between nations, between different ways of thinking about the world. That competition had often led to terrible wars and great suffering. But it had also led to incredible achievements. We humans never solved our fundamental problems, Ryan admitted. We remained aggressive, irrational, and self-destructive right up until the end. We fought wars over resources and ideas and territory. We competed with each other for status and wealth and power. We questioned authority and challenged established wisdom, and refused to accept that anything was impossible. The facility's main computer system started showing critical failure warnings. The heat was affecting even their deep underground electronics. Jake was doing everything he could to keep the transmission equipment functioning, but they were rapidly approaching the point of total system failure. Our flaws were also our strength, Ryan said, his voice growing more urgent as time ran short. Our aggression drove us to compete and innovate. Our irrationality led us to attempt things that logical beings would never try. Our stubbornness made us refuse to accept limitations that wiser species would have recognized as absolute. He told them about human achievements that had come directly from human weaknesses. The exploration of dangerous places because humans were too curious to stay safe. The development of art and music and literature because humans needed to express emotions that served no logical purpose. The pursuit of scientific knowledge even when that knowledge had no practical application. We went to war and learned medicine by treating the wounded, Ryan explained. We competed for resources and learned engineering by building better tools. We questioned our leaders and learned philosophy by debating the nature of truth and justice. Every human flaw pushed us to become something more than we were. The aliens listening to this message had eliminated all of these problems from their societies. They had achieved perfect peace, perfect efficiency, perfect stability, but in doing so, they had also achieved perfect stagnation. They had stopped growing because they had removed all the pressures that forced growth. You have been watching us destroy ourselves, Ryan said, and perhaps you feel vindicated in your peaceful, stable existence. Perhaps our fate confirms your belief that emotion and aggression are evolutionary dead ends that must be eliminated. The facility's reactor started producing dangerous radiation levels. Warning alarms filled the air, and the automated systems began emergency shutdown procedures. But Ryan kept talking, knowing that this message had to be completed no matter what happened to the people sending it. But we ask you to consider what you have lost, he continued. When did you last feel genuine excitement about a new discovery? When did you last experience the satisfaction of overcoming a seemingly impossible challenge? When did you last surprise yourselves with your own capabilities? Ryan's words carried across the galaxy to civilizations that had forgotten what it felt like to struggle, to dream, to reach beyond their current limitations. His warning was simple but profound. Perfection was the enemy of progress, and progress was the only thing that made existence meaningful. Dr. Samantha Cole stepped forward as the facility's emergency systems began their final countdown. As the former UN ambassador and the facility's chief philosopher, she had been chosen to deliver humanity's most important diplomatic message. The aliens listening to this broadcast were not just advanced civilizations, they were the rulers of the galaxy, beings with the power to shape the future of all intelligent life, and Samantha was about to challenge them in a way they had not been challenged for thousands of years. Citizens of the cosmos, Samantha began, her voice carrying the formal weight of diplomatic protocol. Humanity extends to you a final challenge. You have watched us destroy ourselves, and perhaps you feel vindicated in your peaceful, static existence, but we ask you to consider what you have lost in your quest for perfect stability. The facility shook continuously now as Earth's final collapse accelerated. The mountain that had protected them for so long was beginning to crack and crumble under the enormous pressures building up inside the dying planet. But the quantum transmitter continued to function, powered by humanity's last fusion reactor and maintained by engineers who knew they would not live to see another sunrise. We have studied your civilizations for 3 years, Samantha continued. We have analyzed your communication patterns, your technology signatures, and your societal structures. What we discovered is both impressive and deeply troubling. Samantha had spent her entire career studying how civilizations rise and fall. She had seen how human societies had grown and changed throughout history, always struggling with the balance between stability and progress. But the alien civilizations were different. They had achieved perfect balance by eliminating one side of the equation entirely. The Eternal Council of Proxima Centauri, she said, addressing one of the nearest alien governments. Your democratic system has operated without significant change for 12,000 years. Every decision is made through perfect consensus. Every citizen agrees with every policy. There is no dissent, no debate, no conflict of ideas. To many beings, such a system might sound ideal, perfect democracy where everyone agreed and worked together for the common good. But Samantha understood the hidden cost of such perfection. Without dissent, there could be no new ideas. Without debate, there could be no growth. Without conflict, there could be no progress. When did your people last change their minds about something important? Samantha asked. When did they last have a new idea that challenged their fundamental assumptions? When did they last experience the excitement of discovering they were wrong about something significant? The facility's life support systems were failing rapidly. The air was becoming difficult to breathe and the temperature was rising to dangerous levels. But Samantha pressed on, knowing that this message might be humanity's most important gift to the galaxy. The Silicon Collective of the Orion Arm, she continued, addressing another ancient civilization, you have achieved perfect economic efficiency. Every resource is allocated optimally. Every need is met precisely. There is no waste, no inequality, no want. Such a system represented the dream of every economist and social planner. Perfect distribution of resources based on perfect information and perfect cooperation. But Samantha had studied enough human history to understand what such perfection really meant. But when did your people last create something beautiful that served no practical purpose? She asked. When did they last pursue knowledge simply because they were curious? When did they last waste resources on a dream that might never come true? The aliens had optimized away everything that made existence meaningful. They had eliminated suffering, but they had also eliminated joy. They had removed chaos, but they had also removed creativity. They had achieved perfect order at the cost of perfect boredom. We want you to examine your own histories, Samantha said, her voice growing stronger despite the deteriorating conditions around her. Go back to the time before you achieved perfection. Remember what your people were like when they still struggled and dreamed and reached for things beyond their grasp. She challenged them to remember their own origins. When their civilizations had been young and chaotic and full of potential, every intelligent species had once been like humanity, driven by curiosity and ambition, and the stubborn refusal to accept limitations. But somewhere along the way they had chosen safety over adventure, stability over growth. The crystalline architects, Samantha said, returning to one of the most ancient civilizations. Your historical records show that 50,000 years ago, your people were explorers and innovators. They built their first starships with primitive technology and dangerous experimental engines. They risked everything to reach the stars. The historical data they had gathered painted a picture of a civilization that had once been remarkably similar to humanity. Young, aggressive, curious beings who had taken incredible risks to expand beyond their home world. But over time, they had eliminated all the traits that made such expansion possible. Now you travel in ships that use the same technology your ancestors developed 50 millennia ago, Samantha pointed out. You visit the same worlds on the same routes following the same procedures. You have turned exploration into a perfectly efficient, bureaucratic process. The reactor alarms were screaming now, and Jake Morrison was having to make constant adjustments to keep the transmission stable. They had maybe 30 minutes left before total system failure. But Samantha continued her challenge, knowing that these words might echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. We have detected signals from 47 different civilizations, she said, and every single one shows the same pattern. Ancient, stable, efficient, and completely static. You have all chosen the same path. You have all made the same trade-off. You have all given up your souls for security. Her words carried a deliberate provocation, designed to pierce through millions of years of cosmic complacency. She spoke of humanity's greatest achievements, created not despite their chaos and conflict but because of it. We created art that captured the essence of the human experience, she declared. Music that conveyed emotions across any language barrier. Stories that explored the deepest questions of existence. Science that pushed the boundaries of the possible. Philosophy that challenged the most basic assumptions about reality. The aliens had probably created similar things in their distant past, before they had optimized away the chaos that made such creation possible. But for thousands of years, their art had been static, their music formulaic, their stories predictable, their science conservative, their philosophy settled. We found meaning in suffering, Samantha said. We discovered beauty in imperfection. We achieved transcendence not by eliminating our humanity, but by embracing it completely. The facility's main structural supports were beginning to fail. Through the thick walls they could hear the mountain itself groaning under the stress of Earth's final convulsions. But Samantha's voice never wavered as she delivered humanity's final diplomatic message to the stars. Do not let our death be meaningless, she said. Take from our example not a warning about the dangers of emotion and conflict, but a reminder of what you have forgotten in your pursuit of perfection. Her challenge to the galaxy was simple but profound. Remember what it meant to be truly alive. Commander Alex Turner stepped forward as the facility began its final death throes. As the mission's military liaison, he had been chosen to deliver humanity's closing statement because he understood better than anyone what it meant to fight against impossible odds. The quantum transmitter was operating on emergency power now, drawing energy from backup systems that would fail within minutes. But the signal remained strong enough to reach every corner of the galaxy, where intelligent beings might be listening. This is the final segment of humanity's last transmission, Alex announced with military precision. We are not broadcasting this message to beg for rescue or to seek pity for our fate. We are sharing our story because we believe it contains something valuable, something that the galaxy has forgotten. The mountain around them was collapsing. Through the reinforced walls they could hear the grinding of stone and metal as thousands of tons of rock shifted and cracked. The surface of Earth had become an inferno that would have been unimaginable just years before. But here in the depths of the dying planet, 5 humans continued their work with calm determination. We want you to remember us not as the species that destroyed its own world, Alex continued, but as the species that never stopped trying to reach beyond its limitations. Every human who ever lived contributed to this moment, from the first primitive who looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond, to the engineers who built this transmitter with the last resources of a dying world. Alex thought about all the humans who had come before. The soldiers who had fought in humanity's wars, often for causes they barely understood but believed in completely. The explorers who had pushed into unknown territories despite the dangers. The scientists who had spent their lives asking questions that had no immediate answers. The ordinary people who had simply refused to give up when giving up would have been the logical choice. Military history teaches us that the outcome of any conflict is determined not by who has the best weapons or the most resources, Alex said. Victory goes to those who refuse to accept defeat. We humans were never the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced species on our planet, but we were the most stubborn. The facility's structural integrity was failing rapidly. Warning lights flashed throughout the control room and the automated systems were shutting down one by one. Jake Morrison was manually overriding safety protocols to keep the transmitter functioning for just a few more minutes. They all knew that these would be the last words humanity ever spoke to the universe. Every extinction event that hit our planet should have ended our story, Alex continued. Ice ages that lasted for thousands of years. Asteroid impacts that blocked out the sun. Volcanic eruptions that poisoned the air. Disease outbreaks that killed entire civilizations. But somehow some group of humans always survived. They adapted and endured and rebuilt. He spoke of humanity's greatest military achievements, not the victories won through superior force, but the stands made against impossible odds. The last defenders of fallen cities who fought on even when defeat was certain. The resistance movements that continued to operate under brutal occupation. The soldiers who volunteered for suicide missions because someone had to try. The Battle of Thermopylae, Alex said, referencing one of humanity's most famous military actions. 300 Spartan warriors held off an army of hundreds of thousands for 3 days. They knew they could not win. They knew they would all die. But they fought anyway because someone had to make a stand. The aliens listening to this message probably had records of similar events from their own histories, back when they had still been capable of such seemingly irrational heroism. But those days were long past for most galactic civilizations. They had optimized away the chaos and conflict that produced such moments of transcendence. That is what we humans did, Alex explained. We made stands. We fought battles we could not win. We attempted things that were impossible. We refused to accept the limitations that wiser species would have recognized as absolute. The reactor was entering critical failure mode. The radiation levels in the facility were approaching lethal limits. But Alex continued speaking, his words becoming humanity's final act of defiance against a universe that had never shown them any mercy. You have probably studied our military history and concluded that we were a violent and destructive species, Alex said to his alien audience. You have seen our wars and our weapons and our endless conflicts with each other. But you have missed the most important part of that history. He told them about the other side of human military tradition, the codes of honor that protected civilians and prisoners, the ceasefires that allowed enemies to care for their wounded, the soldiers who risked their lives to save people they had never met, the armies that laid down their weapons when the fighting was over and helped rebuild what they had destroyed. We learned that true strength is not the ability to destroy, but the ability to protect, Alex said. Our greatest warriors were not those who killed the most enemies, but those who saved the most lives. Our most honored military traditions were not about conquest, but about sacrifice. The facility's main power coupling finally failed. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls as the life support system struggled to maintain minimal atmosphere. But the quantum transmitter continued to function, drawing power from the last functional battery banks. We may be ending, Alex said, his voice carrying across the galaxy with humanity's final defiance. But our ideas, our dreams, our stubborn refusal to accept the impossible, these things are now part of the cosmic conversation. We challenge you to carry them forward. He thought about what would happen after this transmission ended. Earth would become a dead rock orbiting a star that no longer supported life. The human species would be extinct. But their message would continue traveling through space at the speed of light, reaching new civilizations for centuries to come. To any species listening to this message in the years or centuries to come, Alex said as the transmission began to break up, do not let perfect stability become perfect stagnation. Do not let the elimination of suffering also eliminate joy. Do not let the fear of failure prevent you from attempting greatness. The quantum transmitter finally began to power down as the last backup systems failed. But Alex continued speaking, knowing that even a partial message might be enough to plant seeds of change in minds that had forgotten how to dream. We were here, he said simply. We mattered. We dreamed of touching the stars, and in our final moment we reached across the galaxy to touch you. Remember us and remember what it means to be truly alive. The transmission ended in static as the Deep Mountain Communications Facility finally succumbed to the forces tearing Earth apart. But humanity's final message raced across the galaxy at the speed of light, carrying with it the essence of a species that had chosen to burn brightly, rather than fade quietly into cosmic irrelevance. In the years and centuries that followed, as alien civilizations received and decoded humanity's final broadcast, something unprecedented began to happen across the galaxy. Ancient species started to question their own perfection. They began to wonder if they had traded their souls for stability. And slowly, quietly, the cosmos began to change, not because humanity had survived, but because their message had reminded the stars what it meant to struggle, to hope, and to refuse surrender even in the face of inevitable defeat. Humanity's greatest victory was not in conquering the stars, but in teaching the stars how to dream again.